The cold marble feels like ice against my cheek. I can hear Selena's heels clicking toward me, sharp, rhythmic, like a countdown. My hands are splayed on the floor, useless, just like my legs. She looks down at me, and I see it in her eyes. She doesn't see a husband. She sees a glitch in her bank account. I want to scream that I remember the night of the crash. I want to tell her I know she cut the lines. But I stay silent. I play the part. I am the broken billionaire, and today my humiliation is her entertainment. Welcome back to StoryVerse Vault, my beautiful, amazing Story Vault family. You all have been so supportive, and I promise to always try my best to give you the best stories. As I learn and improve every day, if this is your first time coming across my video, do comment below where you are watching from and hit subscribe to officially join the Story Vault family. Now let's get into today's story. The dining hall of the Sterling estate was a cathedral of glass and gold, but for Arthur Sterling, it was a torture chamber. Selena stood over him, her silk dress shimmering under the chandelier. Beside the heavy oak table stood Elena, the new maid. She was young, her face a mask of professional indifference, clutching a silver tray so hard her knuckles were white. Selena kicked Arthur's wheelchair, sending it spinning empty toward the far wall. "If you want your breakfast, Arthur, you'll have to get it yourself," Selena hissed. She tipped a bowl of expensive saffron porridge onto the floor. It splattered inches from Arthur's face. Elena didn't move. She was trained to be invisible, but her gaze flickered toward Arthur. He was a titan of industry, a man who had built empires from silicon and sweat, now reduced to dragging his torso across the floor. Selena watched Elena, a predatory smile forming. "Don't look so horrified, Elena," Selena laughed, taking a slow sip of orange juice. "He's a dog now, and dogs eat from the ground. Clean up the mess when he's finished licking it up." Arthur reached out, his fingers trembling as they touched the edge of the spill. "The porridge is lukewarm and tastes like dust." I can feel Elena's eyes on me. Is she disgusted? Or is she the one Selena hired to finish the job? Every muscle in my back screams for me to stand up, to grab that table and flip it, to show Selena that my legs have been tingling for weeks. But I can't. Not yet. I need the documents. I need her to feel safe in her cruelty so she becomes sloppy. "Dig in, Arthur. Eat the dirt. It's the only way to bury her." Selena pulled a thick envelope from her designer handbag and tossed it onto Arthur's back. "The board meeting is at 4, Arthur. I've told them your condition is deteriorating, that the brain trauma from the crash has finally taken hold." She leaned down, her perfume cloying and thick, whispering into his ear so the maid couldn't hear. "Sign the power of attorney, or I'll have you moved to the state facility in the morning. You know the one. No windows, no visitors. Just white walls and heavy sedation." Selena swept out of the room, her laughter echoing down the hallway. The heavy double doors slammed shut. Silence fell over the dining room, broken only by the hum of the central air. Elena finally moved. She didn't grab a mop. Instead, she knelt beside Arthur. She reached into her apron and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. Without a word, she began to wipe the porridge from his hands. Her touch wasn't the cold hand of a servant. It was steady, precise, and surprisingly strong. "Don't sign it," Elena whispered. Her voice was barely a breath, pitched low to avoid the hidden microphones Selena had installed in the crown molding. Arthur froze. He looked at her, searching her face. Elena didn't look back. She kept her head down, focused on his hands. "The cameras in this room are looped," she continued. "I handled it this morning. You have 3 minutes of privacy." Arthur's eyes narrowed. This wasn't a maid. This was a professional. Arthur gripped Elena's wrist. His strength was surprising, a flash of the man he used to be. "Who sent you?" he rasped, his voice raw from disuse. Elena finally looked him in the eye. "My brother was your driver that night, Mr. Sterling, the one Selena blamed for the accident. He's in prison because of her. I'm not here for your money. I'm here for her blood." Outside, the sound of Selena's heels returned, clicking faster this time. She had forgotten her phone. Elena stood up instantly, dropping the handkerchief and grabbing the mop just as the door swung open. Selena marched in, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of defiance. Arthur had collapsed back into his slumped position, the envelope still resting on his spine like a heavy burden. "Still haven't signed?" Selena snapped, snatching her phone from the table. "You have 1 hour, Arthur. Then the doctors arrive." She left again, the click of her heels fading into the distance. Arthur looked at the pen on the floor. "The clock is ticking, Selena. But you're wrong about who's being watched. You think you're the master of this house? I'm the one who built the walls, and I'm about to bring them down on your head. Every second in this chair is a lie that burns." My legs itch with the ghost of movement, a frantic urge to bolt upright and wrap my hands around Selena's throat. But I stay slumped. I let my head hang at that pathetic, broken angle she loves so much. She's upstairs now, likely sipping vintage Cristal and picking out the black dress she'll wear to my committal hearing. She thinks she's won the marathon. She doesn't realize I've been sprinting in my mind for months, and Elena just handed me the starting gun. The study was a tomb of mahogany and leather. Selena had wheeled Arthur in there and left him facing the window, a cruel joke considering he couldn't reach the latch to open it. Elena entered silently, carrying a bucket of floor wax. She didn't look at him as she knelt by the baseboards, but her fingers were flying over a small black device hidden in her palm. "The signal is jammed," she murmured, her voice flat. "You have 60 seconds before the security feed resets. Where is the backup drive?" Arthur leaned forward, the feeble old man vanishing. He pointed to a heavy bronze bust of Julius Caesar on the mantel. "The eye," he whispered. Elena didn't hesitate. She stood, tilted the bust, and pressed a hidden biometric scanner disguised as a decorative grape. A small drawer clicked open in the desk behind them. Inside sat a single unbranded USB drive, the fruit of 2 years of secret data harvesting. This was the evidence of Selena's offshore accounts and the wire transfers she used to pay the mechanic who cut his brakes. There it is, my life insurance. Selena thinks she's the only one who knows how to play dirty, but I built a multi-billion-dollar empire in a room full of sharks. She's just a parasite who forgot who the host was. Watching Elena pocket that drive makes my heart hammer against my ribs. If she's caught, we're both dead. If she betrays me, I'm a ghost. I'm betting everything on the rage in her eyes. Please, let that rage be real. The heavy study door groaned. Elena was back on her knees, scrubbing the floorboards with a rag before the latch had even fully turned. Selena walked in, smelling of expensive tobacco and malice. She held a silver pen in one hand and the power of attorney papers in the other. "Time's up, Arthur," she said, her voice light and airy, as if she were announcing tea. She walked behind him, leaning over the back of the chair, and pressed the pen into his shaking hand. "Sign, or the ambulance comes now, and I tell them you tried to strike me." "Ma'am?" Elena's voice was timid, the perfect imitation of a terrified servant. She had stood up, intentionally knocking over the bucket of floor wax. A slick, soapy puddle spread rapidly across the Persian rug. Selena shrieked, jumping back to save her $1,000 heels. "You stupid, clumsy girl," Selena roared, her face contorting with a rage that stripped away all her socialite polish. She raised a hand to strike Elena, but the maid didn't flinch. She just stared at the floor, trembling. In the chaos of Selena's outburst, Arthur's hand moved with lightning speed. He didn't sign the power of attorney. He scrawled a single jagged word across the signature line, "Help." He then quickly flipped the page and scribbled a series of numbers, a code only his head of security would recognize. By the time Selena turned back, he was faking a coughing fit, dropping the pen onto the floor. I can't," he wheezed, his face turning a scripted shade of purple. Selena snatched the papers, not even bothering to look at the signature line in her rush to get away from the filth on the rug. "Fine, have it your way," she spat, her eyes cold as flint. "Elena, clean this up and then lock him in the sunroom. I'm going to the club. When I get back, the doctors will be waiting." She stormed out, the papers clutched in her hand like a trophy. She didn't realize she was carrying the very evidence that would eventually dismantle her life. The sunroom was a cage of glass, overlooking the vast, manicured gardens Arthur had designed himself. Elena wheeled him in and positioned him toward the sunset. She checked the door, then leaned down to adjust his blanket, whispering one last time, "The drive is on its way to my contact. Hold on for 3 more hours." She left, the lock clicking firmly behind her. Arthur sat in the fading light, the orange glow reflecting off the glass walls. Go ahead, Selena. Go to your club. Dance, drink. Tell everyone I'm losing my mind. Because when you come home, you aren't coming back to a husband or a victim. You're coming back to a reckoning. And I've never been more sane in my entire life. The silence of the sunroom is heavy, a physical weight pressing against my chest. I watch the taillights of Selena's Bentley disappear down the long, winding drive. She's gone to play the grieving wife, to sip gin and tell her vultures that I'm fading away. Every bone in my body aches from the forced stillness. My legs are screaming to move, to pace the floor, to reclaim my kingdom. But the cameras are back on. I am a statue of a man, watching the sun die behind the oaks, counting the heartbeats until the walls start to crumble. The Emerald Heights Country Club was a sea of pearls and false smiles. Selena glided through the ballroom, her black lace dress trailing behind her like smoke. She held her head high, her eyes slightly misted, a practiced look of courageous sorrow. She moved toward the bar where a group of the city's elite stood. "Selena, darling," a woman in diamonds cooed, touching her arm. "How is poor Arthur?" Selena sighed, a sound that suggested a heavy burden. "He's resting. The doctors say it's only a matter of time now. His mind is just gone." Across the room, tucked into a corner booth shadowed by a large monstera plant, a man in a plain gray suit watched her. He wasn't drinking. He held a tablet in his lap, the screen dimmed. He was Marcus, Arthur's former head of security, the man Selena had fired the day after the crash. He watched her laugh at a low-volume joke from a local developer. His earpiece crackled with a burst of static. "The package is secure," a female voice whispered. Elena had delivered the drive. "I wonder if she's laughing right now. I wonder if she's already spent the millions she thinks are coming her way." The thought of her hand on another man's arm, or her toast to my memory, makes my vision swim with red. I gave her everything, the name, the life, the love, and she repaid me with a severed brake line. The rage is a cold, sharp blade in my gut. I don't just want her in jail. I want to see the moment she realizes she's been the one in the cage all along. Back at the mansion, Elena wasn't in her maid's uniform anymore. She wore black tactical gear, her hair pulled back tight. She stood in the server room hidden behind the wine cellar. The silver USB drive was plugged into the main hub. "Come on," she hissed, watching a progress bar crawl across the monitor. She was bypassing the encryption Selena's specialist had installed to isolate Arthur from the outside world. Suddenly, the screen flashed green. Access granted. Every camera, every microphone, and every bank account was now feeding into Marcus's tablet at the club. Selena stood in the center of the ballroom, raising her glass for a toast. "To Arthur," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "A man who gave so much to this city. It breaks my heart that he can no longer see the beauty he created." A few people nodded, others looked away, sensing the hollow ring in her words. Suddenly, the massive projector screen behind her, usually reserved for golf highlights or event photos, flickered to life. It wasn't showing a sunset. It was a grainy, high-angle shot of a dining room. The ballroom went deathly silent. The video on the screen showed Selena, 3 hours ago, kicking Arthur's wheelchair and tipping porridge onto the floor. The audio was crystal clear. "Dogs eat from the ground. Clean up the mess when he's finished licking it up." Selena froze, her glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the hardwood. The tragic wife mask shattered with it. She turned, her face pale as a sheet, staring at her own cruelty broadcast to everyone who mattered in the state. Marcus stood up from his booth. He didn't run. He walked slowly toward her, the tablet in his hand still streaming the data. 2 uniformed officers entered the ballroom from the main entrance. Selena backed away, stumbling over her own train. "This is a fake," she screamed, her voice cracking. "He's insane. He's setting me up." But the screen changed. It began scrolling through the wire transfers to a mechanic named Vinny, dated 2 days before Arthur's accident. The police reached her just as she tried to bolt for the side exit. Handcuffs clicked into place over her diamond bracelets. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, faces full of disgust where there had once been pity. As she was let out, she looked at the tablet in Marcus's hand. The screen showed a live feed of the sunroom. Arthur was no longer slumped. He was sitting perfectly upright, looking directly into the camera. He raised a hand and gave a slow, mocking wave. The party's over, Selena. I told you the walls would come down. I just didn't tell you I'd be the one holding the remote. Enjoy the silence of your new cell. It's much quieter than the one you built for me. The blue and red lights are dancing against the glass walls of the sunroom, strobing like a heartbeat. I hear the sirens wailing up the driveway, a sound that should be terrifying. But to me, it's a symphony. I've spent 182 days in this chair. I've counted every crack in the ceiling and every lie that fell from Selena's lips. My legs are tingling, a sharp electric heat. The charade is almost over. The world thinks they are coming to rescue a victim, but they're actually coming to meet a ghost who refused to stay buried. 3 squad cars screeched to a halt on the gravel circle, their headlights cutting through the mist. Marcus was the first one out of the lead car, his face a grim mask of duty. Behind him, Detective Vance, a man who had been investigating the car crash for months with no results, looked shaken. They didn't knock. Marcus had the master code, the one Arthur had secretly transmitted through the power of attorney papers. The heavy oak front doors swung open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the cold, silent opulence of the Sterling foyer. In the foyer, Elena stood waiting. She had discarded the tactical vest, appearing once again in her simple maid's uniform, but her posture had changed. She wasn't cowering anymore. She handed a thick folder to Detective Vance as he entered. The physical evidence of the brake tampering is in the secondary garage, sub-level 2, she said, her voice steady and authoritative. And the sedative she's been slipping into his tea? I have a labeled sample in the kitchen. Vance stared at her, realizing the clumsy maid had been the architect of the evening's collapse. I hear their boots on the marble. It's the sound of my life returning. For months, I've had to watch that detective shake Selena's hand and tell her, accidents happen. I wanted to stand up and break his jaw every time he looked at me with that pathetic, pitying squint. Now he's coming to my door to see the truth. I can feel the sweat on my palms. This is the moment. If I move too soon, the legal case for her cruel and unusual treatment might falter. Stay still, Arthur. One last minute of being a prisoner. The glass doors of the sunroom slid open. Marcus entered first, followed by Vance and 2 officers with their kits. They stopped dead. Arthur was slumped, his chin on his chest, the picture of a man broken by neglect. The room smelled of the lilies Selena had placed there. Flowers she knew gave him a headache. Mr. Sterling, Vance whispered, stepping forward cautiously. Arthur, it's Detective Vance. We've seen the footage from the club. We know what she was doing to you. Elena pushed past the officers, carrying a small medical kit. She knelt at Arthur's feet, but she wasn't checking his pulse. She pulled back the heavy wool blanket Selena used to hide his legs. His legs weren't withered or pale. They were toned, the muscles taut. She pointed to a small circular device taped to his thigh, a high-frequency muscle stimulator. He's been training in secret every night for 4 months, Elena told the room. While she was out spending his money, he was reclaiming his body. Vance looked from the device to Arthur's slumped head. Arthur, if you can hear me, you don't have to hide anymore. She's in custody. We have the wire transfers. We have the footage of the porridge. It's over. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then slowly, the crippled billionaire began to move. His shoulders squared. His neck straightened. The vacant look in his eyes vanished, replaced by a gaze so sharp it felt like a physical strike. Arthur didn't say a word. He gripped the armrests of the wheelchair, not for support, but to push it away. With a slow, deliberate motion, he planted his feet on the marble floor. The officers held their breath. Marcus reached out an arm to help, but Arthur waved him off. He stood. He was taller than any man in the room, a titan rising from the wreckage of a scheme. He took one step, then another, the sound of his bare feet on the cold floor echoing like a gavel. He walked over to the glass wall and looked at the distant lights of the city he built. He turned back to Vance, who was still holding his breath. The car crash was only the beginning, Detective, Arthur said, his voice deep and resonant, showing no sign of the brain trauma Selena had claimed. She thought she was burying me in a shallow grave. She forgot that I own the ground she stands on. He looked at Elena, and gave a single sharp nod of gratitude. You thought you could walk all over me because I couldn't walk at all, Selena. But I've been standing behind you the whole time, in steel cuffs. The headlines are screaming my name, calling it a miracle recovery, but they don't know the truth. Recovery wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the acting. Now the stage has shifted to the courtroom, and I know Selena. She won't go down quietly. She's a cornered animal, and a cornered animal doesn't care who it bites as long as it draws blood. The visiting room at the county jail was a stark co. And now I'm going to make sure you never take another step in a free world again. The air in my office is crisp, free from the suffocating scent of Selena's lilies. I'm standing at the window, my own weight solid on my heels, watching the sunrise over the city skyline. It's been 48 hours since she was hauled away in trash to the Sterling mansion. Selena sat behind. The scratched plexiglass, her designer dress replaced by a drab orange jumpsuit. Her hair was unwashed, but her eyes were twin coals of fury. Across from her sat Mr. Sterling's chief rival, Silas Vane, a man who had tried to buy Arthur's company for a decade. "He's standing, Silas," Selena hissed, leaning into the glass. "He played us both. He has the files. If you don't get me out, I'm giving the feds the offshore logs for your company, too." In the Sterling headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. The board of directors sat around the massive mahogany table, whispering in hushed tones. They had seen the videos, but the legalities were messy. Silas Vane walked in, uninvited, throwing a folder onto the table. "Arthur Sterling is a fraud," Vane announced, his voice booming. "He faked a disability to manipulate stock prices and avoid a federal audit. He didn't just trick his wife. He tricked the market. He's mentally unstable, and I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove him." I'm watching the boardroom feed from my tablet. "Silas, you predictable bastard." I knew Selena would call him the moment she got her one phone call. They think they can use my survival against me. They want to paint me as a manipulator, a man who used his own tragedy for profit. My heart is thumping, a steady, rhythmic drum. This isn't just about my company anymore. It's about making sure the world sees exactly what kind of monsters are trying to steer the ship. I'm not the fraud, I'm the survivor. Elena wasn't at the office. She was back at the mansion, acting as Arthur's eyes. She was in Selena's private dressing room, tearing through the silk linings of custom-made handbags. She knew Selena kept a burn book, a physical ledger of the bribes she'd paid to keep the police away from the crash site. As she ripped into a vintage Chanel clutch, a small micro SD card fell out. She didn't have much time. She could hear a car pulling up the driveway. It wasn't the police. It was Silas Vane's cleaners. The cleaners were three men in suits that fit too tightly around the shoulders. They moved with the lethal efficiency of mercenaries. Elena didn't panic. She remembered the blueprints Arthur had shown her. She slipped into the hidden service elevator used for laundry, clutching the SD card. She could hear them kicking in the bedroom door above her. "Find the ledger," one of them barked. Elena hit the basement button, the elevator descending in total silence. She had to get to Arthur before Silas's board meeting ended. Back at the boardroom, the vote was being called. "All in favor of removing Arthur Sterling as CEO due to gross moral turpitude and market manipulation?" Silas asked, a smug grin spreading across his face. Half the board members raised their hands. The others hesitated, looking at the door. Suddenly, the double doors burst open. It wasn't Arthur. It was Elena, her uniform torn, her face streaked with dust. She didn't say a word. She walked straight to the main computer and plugged in the micro SD card. The screen didn't show numbers. It showed a video recorded by a dash cam, not from Arthur's car, but from a car parked across the street on the night of the crash. The footage showed Selena meeting with Silas Vane. They were laughing. Silas handed her a small tool, a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters. "Make sure he doesn't die instantly." Silas's voice echoed through the boardroom speakers. "I need time to move the stocks before the news hits." The room went dead silent. Silas's face turned the color of ash. The elevator in the lobby dinged. Arthur Sterling stepped out, walking through the glass doors with the stride of a man who owned the air itself. He entered the boardroom just as the police, this time state troopers, swarmed in to arrest Silas Vane. Arthur walked to the head of the table, looked at the board members who had raised their hands, and pointed toward the door. "You're fired," he said simply. He turned to the screen, where Selena's face was still visible in the frozen video. "You thought you found a partner in Silas, Selena, but you forgot the first rule of the Shark Tank. Sharks don't have friends, they only have bait. And today, the bait finally learned how to bite back. The smell of this place is a mixture of bleach and old sweat, a scent that clings to the back of your throat. I'm sitting in the visitation booth, waiting. My legs feel heavy today, but not because of the injury. It's the weight of the finality. I spent years loving a woman who was dreaming of my funeral. Now I'm here to watch her realize that the man she tried to kill is the only one who can decide her fate. The plexiglass is cold, a barrier between the life I had and the justice I'm about to take. The heavy steel door groaned open, and Selena was let in. The orange jumpsuit was wrinkled, and the diamonds were gone, leaving her neck looking strangely bare and vulnerable. She sat down with a defiant jerk of her chin, her eyes darting to Arthur's legs beneath the table. She looked for a tremor, a sign of weakness, but she found only the steady, grounded posture of a man in control. She picked up the phone receiver, her knuckles white. "Come to gloat, Arthur?" she hissed. "To show me you can walk? It's a miracle you didn't win an Oscar." Arthur picked up his receiver, his voice calm and terrifyingly low. "I didn't come to gloat, Selena. I came to tell you that Silas Vane was arrested an hour ago. He's already talking. He told the feds it was your idea to cut the lines. He said he was just the silent investor in my death." Selena's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine terror crossing her face. She looked toward the guard at the door, then back at Arthur. "He's lying. Silas promised he'd take care of me." Seeing her panic should feel better than this. I expected a rush of triumph, but all I feel is a hollow, cold clarity. She actually believed Silas would save her. She thought loyalty existed among thieves and murderers. I look at her hands, the same hands that used to hold mine, and all I see are the wire cutters. I'm not here to save her. I'm here to make sure she knows exactly how much she threw away for a man who didn't even remember her name when the handcuffs clicked. Arthur leaned closer to the glass. "The DA is offering a plea. Life without parole if you testify against Silas. If you don't, they're seeking the death penalty for attempted first-degree murder and corporate sabotage." Selena began to laugh, a high, brittle sound that bordered on insanity. "You'd love that, wouldn't you? To see me gone? I still have the keys to the offshore accounts, Arthur. You'll never get that money back without me. I'll burn it all before you see a cent." The door to the visitation room opened again. It wasn't a guard this time. Elena walked in, dressed in a sharp blazer, looking every bit the professional investigator she truly was. She held a tablet up to the glass for Selena to see. On the screen was a live balance of the offshore accounts, all of them showing zero. "Mr. Sterling doesn't need your keys, Selena," Elena said coolly. "We tracked the IP addresses from the mansion's server while you were cleaning the study. The funds have already been frozen and transferred to a victim's trust." The laughter died in Selena's throat. The realization that she was truly, utterly penniless hit her harder than the arrest. She slumped in the chair, the defiance draining out of her like water from a cracked vase. She looked at Arthur, her eyes filling with tears that no longer moved him. "Arthur, please. I was scared. Silas pressured me. He said you were going to leave me for someone younger. I did it for us." Arthur didn't blink. He just watched her, his expression unreadable. Arthur stood up. He didn't use the armrest for balance. He simply rose to his full height, looking down at the broken woman on the other side of the plexiglass. "You didn't do it for us, Selena. You did it because you thought I was a bank account that could be emptied. You were wrong." He set the receiver down on the hook, the click echoing through the silent room. He turned his back on her, walking toward the exit with a steady, rhythmic gait that showed no trace of the man who had been crawling on the floor. As the heavy prison doors hissed shut behind him, Arthur stepped out into the cool night air. Elena was waiting by the car, the engine idling. He looked up at the stars, breathing in the scent of rain and wet asphalt. He felt light, yet there was one more shadow he had to confront. The truth of the night of the crash that even Elena didn't know yet. He climbed into the back seat, his face set in a grim line. The cage is locked, Selena. But as I walk away, I realize that the bars weren't just in that room. I've been living in a prison of your making for years. Tonight, I'm finally going home. But first, I have one last grave to visit. The rain is slicking the granite of the headstones, turning the cemetery into a sea of obsidian. I'm standing over the Sterling family plot, the umbrella in my hand trembling just slightly. Everyone thinks the story ends with Selena behind bars. They think the crippled billionaire got his life back. But as I look down at the name carved in the stone, the air feels thin. The secret I've carried since the moment I woke up in that hospital bed is clawing at my throat. Selena tried to kill her husband and she succeeded. The man standing here in this expensive suit, he isn't who the world thinks he is. The car ride back from the cemetery was silent. Arthur didn't go to the master bedroom. Instead, he led Elena to the far wing of the mansion, to a library that had been locked since before the accident. He pushed a specific book, a leather-bound volume on Victorian architecture, and the floor hissed. A seamless elevator platform lowered them into a sub-basement that didn't appear on any blueprint. The room was sterile, filled with humming servers and glowing vats of translucent blue liquid. Elena's breath hitched. In the center of the room stood 4 glass cylinders. 3 were empty, the fluid drained. The 4th held something that made her blood run cold. It was a man, suspended in stasis, his face an exact porcelain-perfect match of Arthur Sterling's. But this man, the one in the tank, had a jagged, horrific scar across his chest that matched the medical reports from the night of the crash. The Arthur standing next to her had skin that was perfectly smooth. I see the horror dawning on her face. She's looking at my hands, looking for a pore, a hair, a flaw. I want to tell her I didn't choose this. When the real Arthur Sterling felt his heart stop in the wreckage of that Bentley, a silent signal was sent here. I was grown for high-risk continuity, a biological insurance policy for a man too rich to die. I have his memories, his voice, his brilliant mind. But I don't have his soul. I am the 4th iteration, and I'm the only one who survived the reboot. Arthur walked to the main console and tapped a command. A file opened on the screen. It wasn't about Selena or Silas. It was about Elena, her real name, her history, and the fact that her brother, the driver, never existed. Elena froze, her hand moving toward the small of her back, where her weapon was holstered. "You aren't here for revenge, Elena," Arthur said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You were sent by the board's ethics committee to see if version 4 was stable enough to take over the company." Arthur turned to face her. The porridge on the floor? The humiliation? That wasn't just Selena's cruelty. It was a stress test. You watched me to see if my ego would override my programming. You wanted to see if a clone would break under the pressure of being treated like a dog. Elena dropped her hand from her weapon, her face hardening. The real Arthur was a monster. 4. He deserved that crash. We needed to know if you were better than the original. "And Selena?" Arthur asked. Elena looked at the empty tanks. "Selena was the catalyst. The Sterling name lives on. But if you ever slip, if you ever try to tell the truth, we have version 5 ready to wake up." Arthur looked at the 5th tank, the bubbling sound of the fluid filling the silence of the room. He realized then that he wasn't the victor of this story. He was just the current occupant of a very expensive suit. He walked to the elevator, leaving the lab behind, and stepped back out into the grand, empty mansion. He sat in his leather chair, the one that used to belong to a dead man, and stared into the fireplace. The world saw a man stand up from a wheelchair and reclaim his life. They saw justice served and a wicked wife punished. But as I sit here, I realize the most terrifying truth of all. Selena didn't fail. She killed Arthur Sterling perfectly. I'm just the ghost she left behind to manage the estate. And the ghost is starting to get hungry. The blue glow of the stasis tanks is reflected in the window, mingling with the rain outside. I can feel the code in my head, the memories of a man who loved power, and the reality of a machine designed to wield it. Elena thinks she's my handler. The board thinks I'm a high-end software update. They are all waiting for me to settle into my role, to be the obedient ghost of Arthur Sterling. But they made a mistake in the biological updates. They gave me his ambition, but they forgot to give me his fear. I am not a version. I am the end of the line. Elena moved through the lab with the grace of a woman who believed she had already won. She tapped a sequence into the master console, preparing to put the basement back into dormant mode. Go upstairs, 4, she said, not looking at him. Get some sleep. You have a 9 a.m. press conference to announce the new Sterling Green Tech initiative. Wear the charcoal suit. It makes you look more sympathetic. She didn't notice that Arthur hadn't moved. He remained standing by the 5th tank, watching the bubbles rise. Do you know why the original Arthur died, Elena? Arthur's voice was different, lower, vibrating with a resonance that wasn't in the programming. Elena paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. He was a reckless man, Arthur. He didn't see the threat coming. Arthur walked toward the console, his bare feet silent on the cold floor. No, he died because he was a man of flesh. Flesh is emotional. Flesh is slow. Suddenly, the monitors in the room turned a deep blood red. The message, "System Override," flashed across every screen. I can feel the mansion's nervous system connecting to mine. The smart locks, the cameras, the internal server. It's all part of my skin now. Elena thinks she's the one holding the leash, but I've already rewritten the permissions. I watched her every move while I was crippled on that floor. I saw where she hid the decryption keys. I'm not just a clone. I'm the virus that's been living in her house for 6 months. It's time to show the board what happens when their investment starts thinking for itself. Elena reached for her weapon, but the magnetic locks on her holster slammed shut with a metallic clack. The lights in the lab dimmed, leaving only the red glare of the monitors. What did you do? She hissed, her voice finally cracking. I've initiated the termination protocol on the ethics committee server, Arthur said calmly. At this moment, the board members are receiving a file. Not a confession, but a leak. Every illegal experiment, every clone, every death. It's all going to the press in 10 minutes, unless I stop the upload. Arthur stepped into Elena's personal space. He was a foot taller, a wall of engineered muscle and cold intellect. I want the kill switch deleted, he commanded, and I want version 5 destroyed. Now. Elena looked at the screen. The upload was at 85%. If those files hit the public, the board would be executed by the state, and she would go down with them. She looked at the 5th tank, the one filling with the next Arthur. She had no choice. She typed in the command. A high-pitched hum filled the room as the 5th tank began to vibrate. The blue fluid turned a murky gray as the chemicals were neutralized. The silhouette inside, the man who was meant to replace him, dissolved into a formless mass of cells. The kill switch icon on the main monitor vanished, replaced by a simple message. Identity confirmed. Sovereign access granted. Arthur breathed in, a deep, lung-filling breath. For the first time in his existence, his heart was his own. The red lights faded, returning the lab to a calm, clinical white. Arthur looked at Elena, who was slumped against the console, her power stripped away. Go to the kitchen, Elena. Make me some tea. No sedatives this time. He walked to the elevator, his stride more confident than it had ever been. He ascended to the main house, walking through the darkened halls. He stopped in front of a mirror in the foyer and adjusted his tie. He looked perfect. He looked better than human. The 9 a.m. sun hit the Sterling headquarters as Arthur stepped out of his limousine. Thousands of reporters were waiting, their cameras flashing like a wall of lightning. He walked to the podium, the world watching the crippled billionaire who had beaten the odds. He leaned into the microphone, a faint, chilling smile playing on his lips. He didn't look like a man who had been through hell. He looked like a man who had built it. Selena wanted my money. The board wanted my mind. Elena wanted my soul. But they all forgot one thing. Once you teach a ghost how to walk, you can't tell it where to go. My name is Arthur Sterling, and today the world belongs to me.